America is coming back to 4,000 acres of Philippine land it walked away from 35 years ago. They're not bringing troops this time, they're bringing microchips. And to understand why, you have to understand something most people don't know about the Philippines. The country you probably think of as call centers, nurses, domestic workers, has been quietly making the microchips in your phone for 50 years. Almost nobody outside the industry knows this. Today I want to unpack what's actually happening here. A 50-year story most people have never heard of. A 4,000-acre deal that's about to change the global chip map. And a piece of land with one of the most complicated histories in the Philippines. Let's get into it. Let me start with a number that should not be possible. The Philippines is the 9th largest chip exporter in the world. 9th. Ahead of most of Europe, ahead of most of Latin America, in the same league as countries with a fraction of the Philippines' economic profile. Semiconductors and electronics are roughly 40 to 60% of everything this country exports. 3 million people work in the industry, directly or indirectly. That's about 20% of the Philippine economy. And almost none of this is known outside the industry. So how did this happen? 1974, Intel opens a test and assembly plant in Makati. This is 6 years after Intel itself was founded. Philippines is one of Intel's first overseas sites. 5 years later, Texas Instruments opens a factory in Baguio, then Fairchild, then a wave of others. By the 1980s, the Philippines was quietly becoming one of the most important nodes in the global chip supply chain. Texas Instruments is still there 47 years later. They've won something called the Billionaires Award 11 times. It's given to companies exporting $2.5 billion a year or more out of Philippine economic zones. 11 times. Their Baguio facility alone has over 3,000 employees and has pulled in about 67 billion pesos of investment. From a factory on a mountain 300 kilometers north of Manila, after Texas Instruments came Amcor, came Analog Devices, ON Semiconductor, ST Microelectronics, ROHM, Nexperia. Today there are roughly 500 semiconductor and electronic companies operating in the Philippines. Most of them are in places you might already pass through, like Laguna, Cavite, Clark, Metro Manila, even Cebu, Baguio. You've probably driven past one of these factories without knowing what was inside. So here's the reality. The phone you're watching this on has a chip in it, and there's a real chance that chip was assembled, tested, or packaged in the Philippines. Not designed here, not built from raw silicon here, but finished here. The Philippines does what the industry calls ATP, assembly, testing, packaging. It's the final stage of chip production. Take a silicon wafer designed in California and fabricated in Taiwan, cut it up, wire it up, put it in a package, test it, ship it out to the rest of the world. That last stage is where the Philippines has been quietly dominant for 50 years. But here's the uncomfortable part of this story. ATP is the low value floor of the chip industry. The chip that sells for $100 generates maybe $5 or $10 of value during the ATP stage. The other $90 is created somewhere else. Designed in the US, fabrication in Taiwan or South Korea, advanced packaging in a few specialized places, Philippines has been the final assembly line of the global chip industry for 50 years, which means this country has captured a fraction of what it could have captured. And people here know this. That's why the government just announced a plan to hit $110 billion in annual electronics exports by 2030. That's more than double the current level. And it requires the Philippines to move up the chain into advanced packaging, into integrated circuit design, and eventually into wafer fabrication itself, which is where the story gets interesting. April 16, 2026, Philippine government signed onto something called Pax Silica. It's an American-led initiative, a coalition of countries building what the U.S. State Department calls a trusted supply chain for semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. Australia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, the UK, 12 other nations. The Philippines became the 13th, and with that signature, the two countries announced plans to build a 4,000-acre industrial hub in the Philippines. State Department called it the first of its kind in the world, purpose-built machine for allied manufacturing, an AI-native investment acceleration hub. 4,000 acres, for context, that's roughly the size of a mid-sized city. It's bigger than the entire financial district of most capitals in Southeast Asia. The U.S. is getting to occupy the site rent-free for the first 2 years, according to the base's Conversion and Development Authority, and after that, a lease rate gets negotiated. Stated goal is to move the Philippines from low-value assembly into the kind of advanced manufacturing the country has been locked out of for 50 years. Target by 2030 is $70 billion in semiconductor exports alone. On paper, this looks like an economic upgrade 50 years in the making, but here's where the story gets complicated. The 4,000 acres is in a place called New Clark City in Tarlac province. And if you know anything about Philippine history, the name should make you think, because New Clark City is built on land that was once part of the largest overseas U.S. military base on Earth, Clark Air Base. The United States started using this land in 1903. Fort Stotzenburg first, then Clark Field, then Clark Air Base. For almost a century, this was American soil. Not legally, but functionally. 15,000 people lived on base at its peak. U.S. fighter jets flew out of Clark during World War II, during the Vietnam War, during the Cold War. It was the staging point for American power across the entire Asia Pacific. And then in 1991, something happened that almost nobody in Washington saw coming. The lease agreement between the U.S. and the Philippines was coming up for renewal. A new treaty had been negotiated, and it would have extended the American presence at Subic Bay for 10 more years. Clark was already effectively gone by this point. Mount Pinatubo had erupted in June 1991, burying the base in volcanic ash. Americans evacuated. But Subic was the real question. Everyone expected the Philippine Senate to approve the extension. The U.S. was offering $203 million a year. Philippine president at that time was lobbying hard for it to pass. Public polls favored keeping the Americans. On September 16, 1991, Philippine Senate voted 12-11 to reject the treaty. 12 senators against. Media called them the Magnificent 12. They ended almost a century of continuous American military presence in the Philippines. Clark was formally turned over 2 months later. Subic followed the year after that. The Americans left. Fast forward 35 years. They're coming back to the same region, not as a military, but as a partner in the largest foreign chip project ever attempted in this country, on land that's part of the same former military reservation. This is where the story gets a bit blurry, because the details of what this deal actually looks like are still being worked out in public. The official State Department announcement describes an economic security zone, allied manufacturing, a fusion of American expertise with Philippine talent and resources. That's the clean version. But the South China Morning Post reported something different. Quoting the U.S. Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs, they said the hub would operate under U.S. common law, not Philippine law. American common law on Philippine soil, with diplomatic immunity like protections for a foreign-led industrial zone. Those details don't appear in the official U.S. announcement. They've been reported but not confirmed by both governments in writing. Philippine legal analysts have flagged this because the law that governs special economic zones in the Philippines explicitly says those zones have to operate, quote, within the framework of the Constitution and the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Philippines, end quote. Which means until there's a treaty, a statute, or some kind of formal legal instrument published in public, the actual shape of this deal is still in question. And that's why you're seeing two very different reactions to this inside the Philippines. On one side, you have people saying this is the biggest economic opportunity in a generation. The president of the Strat-Based Institute, a Manila think tank, called it a Kickstarter project. A fellow at Perry Worldhouse called it an evolution of the U.S.-Philippine alliance. An economist at one of the country's biggest banks said it could reduce the Philippines' exposure to tariff risks and deepen its role in critical supply chains. On the other side, you have groups calling it a massive sellout. The Kilusang Macbubukid ang Filipinas, a farmers' federation, said it would intensify land grabbing and militarization. Lawmakers from Makabayan bloc have demanded full congressional scrutiny. They're asking whether these facilities could function as dual-use platforms. Civilian on paper, military capable in practice. Environmental groups have raised another concern. When the Americans left Subic and Clark in 1991, the U.S. General Accounting Office, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the World Health Organization all confirmed serious contamination at more than 46 sites across the two bases. The U.S. government determined it was not legally responsible for the cleanup, and that has never been resolved. Now, the same region is being offered for industrial use, again. So this isn't a simple story. Here's what this video is really about. The Philippines has been one of the most important places in the global chip industry for 50 years. Almost no one outside the industry has given it credit. The work has been there the whole time. The 3 million workers, the 500 companies, the engineering graduates, the Baguio facilities and the Laguna ones, the Cavite ones and the Clark ones. Now, a kid from Cagayan Valley named Dado Banatao helped make the personal computer possible. He wasn't an exception. It was part of a pipeline that's been running for 5 decades. What's changing now is not whether the Philippines matters to chips. It already does for a long time. What's changing is whether the world is finally going to notice and whether the deal that makes the world notice serves the Philippines or uses it. That's definitely not a question for a foreigner to answer, but I'll say this much. The Magnificent 12 voted the way they did in 1991 because they wanted a country that made decisions for their own reasons, not for someone else's. Whatever this deal turns into, the same question is still on the table. The chips will get made, the factories will get built, the money will flow, but the real question is, who gets to decide what that means for the country the deal is happening inside? As always, guys, thank you for taking the time to watch. Take care.